So, let's talk about Halo 3 ODST. This game was, and still is, kind of an outlier to the series. As far as the shooters go, no game has received any sort of expansion to it. And so this really presented Bungie with a unique opportunity to really craft a campaign without the added, I guess you could say, burden of also having to craft a solid multiplayer. Because the multiplayer really was like the main point of Halo. It was Halo's bread and butter. It was what carried the series. But of course, the series also had good campaigns. But this allowed them to really make something more self-contained, and also from a unique perspective, because this is still, so far, the only campaign where you get to step in the role of just a regular soldier, not some Spartan super soldier or Covenant equivalent in the case of the Arbiter. And, even with Reach, the following game, you're still playing as a Spartan. You're not the Master Chief, but you're still an equivalent of him, in a sense. But in this game, you're just a dude. You've got no, genetic improvement, no, training from birth or anything like that. No power armor. You're an ODST, so, badass elite unit. But it's, more like a special forces type deal versus superpowered superhero. And so they were able to take that and craft a more self-contained narrative. Yeah, it had to be set in the Halo universe and everything, but it wasn't confined to the overarching story. It wasn't, required to be a sequel to Halo 1, 2, or 3. It was able to be just a side story in the universe of Halo, and from a different perspective, and they were able to tell a more personal story. Something that didn't have to do with the stakes of saving humanity or the world or anything like that. It was just, you start out with a mission, and that very quickly goes awry, and then you're just trying to find your friends and get the hell out of there and live to fight another day. And, they throw in, their plot twists in there and everything. You've got Dare with her secret objective and everything, which ends up being rescuing this engineer, that, all that. And that's great. That made the story a lot more interesting. But at the end, you accomplish something that is beneficial for humanity and everything, but it's still one piece of the puzzle. And so that freedom that Bungie had to just create something new and interesting really helped in development of this game, and it also served to create something very unique in the series, and it worked to great effect, really. There are a lot of things different about this campaign, both mechanically and structurally, to any other Halo game. It's, not a linear story. It's told through these flashbacks. But then when you're playing as the main character, as the rookie, you are playing through this quasi open world setting. And that was, that's something that was totally new to Halo and really interesting. Could it have been more fleshed out, used to greater effect? Sure. But at the same time, I don't feel like open world shooters were very common at the time. Not that I remember. And yet, so you had open world games as a general idea, and even those were still kind of coming into their own. And so these, big worlds that are full of stuff to do and, lists to check off and everything, they were still kind of developing at the time. So it wasn't really something that you could consider standard for open world games. And so I don't feel you could hold that against this campaign. And at the same time, you still have to take it from the perspective of this is an expansion. So the fact that it had those audio logs and that whole side story with Sadie and everything was great in and of itself. And it gave greater purpose to this open world. But at the end of the day, it was just really enjoyable to have one big area to kind of learn and explore and give you those freeform options in combat that, work really well with Halo. And it's something actually you can kind of see them pulling some cues from Far Cry, which was another game that really excelled at giving you a more open play space with a lot of options for how to approach combat. And so the open world in this game, one thing it doesn't really do is tell any sort of direct narrative, but it establishes a very effective atmosphere, especially with the way they crafted Virgil, the superintendent, into the whole thing. And that worked really well for the collectibles and stuff too. The fact that Virgil would sort of hijack these aspects of the environment to kind of clue you in to there being an audio log in the area, or for the major missions to clue you into the presence of an ally beacon. But then at the same time, with the major missions and everything, you have all of the context clues alluding to what happened in that area that, yeah, become a lot more obvious once you've played the mission and everything, but the fact that you can go back and look at them and be like, oh, wow, okay, this was Dare's helmet that flew through the window. And then when you look down, you have the entire area that you just fought through as Buck, and you can actually go down there and go to Dare's drop pod and everything, and see the remnants of that conflict. Same thing with you have the blown up Scorpion and Wraith over by the Oni station, where Mickey met up with Dutch. And you have the smashed statue where Dutch, crashed his warthog and everything. And that really helps to emphasize a sort of detective aspect to it. You're not a detective, obviously, but they really went for, they very clearly went for a strong noir-esque feel for the game. And so, you have your character, wandering around, the city at night, looking for clues to find his friends, and then you get the cool flashbacks and everything, and those give you your very well structured story missions that fill in those gaps. They tell you what's been happening with your allies, and those pieces come together to tell a compelling story. And so even though it's not the most fleshed out open world or anything like that, it did a good job of accomplishing what they set out to do. And like I said, it's an expansion, it's not a full game, and so it didn't have to be this dense, bustling world full of things to do. It just had to accomplish those couple goals. And so you have that alongside the slight adjustments that they made to Halo 3's combat system, they took out dual wielding and they brought back the health meter. They changed the shield to stamina while, decreasing that so that it's not like this extremely defensive aspect. It's just a little bit of damage that you can take before you take permanent health damage. And, they made you shorter and they made you weaker and they made you a lot more vulnerable. But then they gave you your own personal tools, to kind of fit the ODST aesthetic, to give you a little bit more options when it came to stealth or sneaking by, that sort of thing. So of course, the silenced SMG and the silenced pistol, each with their own scope, worked really well. They gave your character his own sense of identity compared to the Master Chief, because those are tools that are very clearly tailored to you as the rookie that the Master Chief has never used. But making those small adjustments really, really effectively served to convey that idea of you being a regular soldier. And so, yeah, they succeeded at that. They succeeded really fantastically well at that. And everything else about the game, the pacing, the level design, man, everything was so top-notch. Except for Data Hive. Data Hive was just a lot of samey corridors, a lot of, copy-pasted pathways. They had to have that one level that was just not that great. But even then, it's not the whole level. It's most of the level, sure, but the level has its own unique areas. And so the fact that Data Hive is not that well designed doesn't really bring down the campaign as a whole. It's a low point, but not very significant of one. And so a lot of what goes right in the design of this game's levels are really just kind of things that were taken from mostly Halo 2 and 3 that worked really well, and just iterating on that, but doing so in a dense way, so that there's not a lot of fluff to this game. Probably the most amount of fluff to this game is in the open world, but in the missions themselves, they're very compact. fact, they're not short. I wouldn't say they're short. They're about the length of a regular Halo level. But it definitely feels like Bungie really nailed what types of encounters were fun about their games, and just not necessarily just doing the same thing again, but making iterations of that type of gameplay without any of the extra stuff that didn't really work so well. And of course, they brought back some things that, they didn't really take a lot of time to show off in Halo 3, if at all. I mean, the big one is definitely the Banshee. You have basically an entire level dedicated to the Banshee, and that was great. That was really needed because it was sorely missed in Halo 3. And so the fact that you can go into this game, which is basically Halo 3, it's a bit different, but same foundation, and have that opportunity to really thoroughly explore the Banshee in this game. And then other things like you have a large section of the coastal highway with the Gauss Hog. There was a little, very small section in Halo 3 where you got to use the Gauss Hog, but there's a lot more of it in this game. And then the addition of the engineers, a brand new Covenant species, and they made them pretty interesting in this game. They kind of worked the overshield into this more of a story context versus just being this power up that you found sometimes. But having this non-combative opponent really served to change things up a bit. And it has its upsides and downsides. I think they could be annoying with how sturdy they were. And obviously they were much more vulnerable to energy weapons, but they were interesting sometimes and a little bit annoying sometimes, and so they were an experiment. And once again, it helped to set this game apart, give this game enough of its own identity. And of course, the story very heavily revolves around the engineers. And they were, in the context of Halo as a series, something that people had wanted to see for a long time. The engineers were a species that were intended to be in the game since Halo 1. And they were always cut because Bungie really couldn't figure out how to work them into combat. And I think they did a good job of that. And then so the other thing that really sets this game apart is the final mission. And I talked about this in the playthrough, but they really went ahead, and I don't know if I could say they tried something different, because it's not really that different of a gameplay section. But obviously it's different from what they had ended the previous games with. And it was very apparent with Halo 1, 2, and 3 that they kind of just didn't know how to end a game from a gameplay standpoint. Obviously, the games had their effective endings and ineffective endings in the case of Halo 2. But from a gameplay standpoint, yeah, everyone liked the Warthog runs, but it was a unique thing of Halo 1, and by the time Halo 3 came around, did it again. It was fun, it was a bit better, but it was also more of the same. It was very clear that they were just like, whatever, we'll do a Warthog run again. Fuck it. And in this game, they really embraced the intensity of their vehicle sections, and more importantly, they embraced the intensity of their vehicle combat. And what they did with the coastal highway was really, it was just what they needed to do. They started you out with a regular Warthog, and they ramped everything up. You start out just fighting grunts, and then they throw some jackals in there, and a brute or two, and then you've got some ghosts, but by the time you start seeing some ghosts, then you get the Gauss Hog, which has the heavier gun, so you can fight off the ghosts easier and kill brutes more easily and stuff like that. And it just keeps ramping up and up until you get to the Scorpion, and then you encounter a ton of phantoms, and you encounter the Scarab, which you don't really kill, but it was a cool set piece and everything. And then you get to the end of the highway, and I think this is probably where people are gonna be a little bit iffy on which one they preferred. Some people might have preferred to just end it at the end of the highway, but then you get to the base at the end that you defend, and you get this strong defense mission. And once again, I mentioned in the playthrough, but Halo has always been known for having good defense sections, and they were always usually a bit more organic. It comes to mind the first building encounter on the second level of Halo 1, or the beginning of Outskirts in Halo 2. Sections like that have always been very standout, memorable sections of Halo. So they really went all out with the defense section that concluded this game. And despite the unfortunate bug that I ran into in my playthrough, it's generally a very intense section. And, I like the idea that they set you up in this base with a lot of defensive options and a lot of ammo and different guns, and just, let you go ham with all the different combat strategies and everything. And it worked out really well. And I should also, of course, mention that it works really well alongside the big new addition to this expansion, which was the firefight mode. The multiplayer mode of Halo 3 ODST was a brand new idea to the series of a cooperative wave defense multiplayer mode, where you're just fighting off as many Covenant as you can. And that's something that people definitely wanted. The version of firefight that was in Halo Reach definitely was a lot more fleshed out with different options and everything, but it was definitely a good starting point that they established in this expansion. That opportunity to just team up with, up to 3 of your friends and just see just how many Covenant you can take on in these well-crafted battle arenas was really satisfying. And of course, Gears of War had started that trend. You had Horde mode in Gears of War, and then Call of Duty introduced its Zombies mode and everything. So there was a precedent. Then there was kind of pressure on Halo to have their own survival mode. But it's definitely poignant that that type of encounter is what they ended this game on, because the fact that they put so much effort into that type of mode of gameplay, it really acknowledges the fact that that's part of this game's identity. And thematically, it works really well too, because, the game isn't just about you as the rookie. It's about your whole team. It's not just you. It's you and Buck and Dutch and Mickey and Romeo and Dare as well. And when you play Firefight, you can play as any of those characters and everything. And of course, in the flashback missions, you play as those characters. And so having the final moment of this game, the final encounter of this game, be that last stand with all of those characters definitely serves as a solid conclusion. And that's really what Bungie needed from this game. I think that's the biggest thing that Bungie learned from this game. Really. Straight up. Bungie learned how to end a game with ODST. And so what does this game have to offer? Well, it's exploration of a more open level structure. It explores a lot of the Halo universe and Halo's gameplay, and I think that's all it needed to do. As an expansion, that's really all it needed to do. So that's not a criticism I can levy against it. And in fact, I think that's something I can praise it on. It's a Halo 3 expansion, and it expands Halo well beyond the scope of anything we saw as the Master Chief. And so through that success, and through the success of just making an incredibly solid single-player story, this game was absolutely a very commendable effort by Bungie. Thank you for tuning in to my autopsy of Halo 3 ODST. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're interested in seeing my playthroughs of each game live, you can check out my Twitch channel at twitch.tv/investigative gaming. And there I have a schedule so you can see what game I'm playing next and when to catch the stream. So next time we are going to be exploring Halo Reach, Bungie's final entry in the Halo series. Thank you for watching. This has been Investigative Gaming. Peace, guys.